Hi, welcome to the Paige Doodle Club. I'm Mike Paige, and today we're going to be drawing some trees. This is a great lesson to learn some different techniques and various strokes to use with your pencil to get different desired results. So join along, don't be afraid to make mistakes, and let's get right to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a horizon line along the bottom of the paper. And for each tree, I'm going to draw the tree as much as I can in the direction that it's growing. This usually helps in creating a realistic tree. And I'm also going to be kind of kicking the pencil out quickly to make strokes rather than carefully drawing like this, going real slowly. If you want it to look natural, it usually looks better if you go relatively quick. And then again, for the roots, I'm going to draw them, the direction that they grow, rather than from down up. Roots grow outward. And then I'm going to go ahead and start filling in leaves here. And to make leaves, rather than try to draw individual leaves, I'm going to do really quick scribbles. And that way I'm kind of implying leaves without worrying about drawing every single one of them. And I'm going to start focusing on what the overall shape of the tree is. So this one's going to be a maple tree. I'm going to have it be relatively round. And sometimes you get a maple tree that's a perfect circle shape, and sometimes they're kind of tall at the middle and then they start coming out not quite in a nice circle. So maybe sketch in the outer parameters of where your leaves are and the branches. And then filling it in, it's all just going to be these little scribbles. And that way you're letting the viewer's brain fill it in for them, rather than you trying to draw the thousands and thousands of leaves that would be on a tree. And you can test out sort of the side of the pencil versus using the tip of the pencil. You'll get different results that way. So the side of the pencil is going to be filling in larger patches if I've got, shadows within the leaves. Create a little bit extra weight there. And the tip will just give you a thinner scribble, obviously. And I'm using a 3B pencil right now. It's a little bit softer of a graphite and a little bit darker than a 2B that you're used to using for tests at school and stuff like that. I always tell people when you're looking at art pencils, you can look at them like a number line. So the higher the number, the further to the one extreme or the other it is. H pencils are hard graphite or hard lead. So an 8H is going to be a very light pencil, but it's also going to have a very hard tip. You don't have to sharpen them very frequently, but they're also very hard to erase because they tend to dig right into the paper. So if you're using something like an 8H or even a 4H pencil, you want to go very lightly with it and not press into the paper at all. And then if you're using a B pencil, like this is a 3B, so this is relatively soft lead, but it's not something that I'm going to be sharpening every 5 minutes or anything for most things. If I don't need a super sharp tip on it, I can let it go a little while. So the B graphites will be darker and softer, and the H graphites will be harder and produce a lighter mark. And again, the higher the number, the further to the extreme it is, whether it's lighter or darker. So an HB pencil or a 2H or a 2B are pretty much the middle of your number line. And we're still scribbling leaves here on this maple tree. This is the part that takes a little while. I think maybe next I'll do a willow tree just to compare the styles of trees and how to make them. And these little quick strokes that I'm making, it's almost like you're writing in cursive, but not actually making any letters. And sometimes I do sort of that shape. A lot of times it's kind of the same scribble. And if you just add slight variations to what you're doing, it's mostly muscle memory once you get going. But if you add slight variations to what you're doing, nobody's eye is going to look at it and say, that's the same thing over and over. Your eye is probably looking at that right now, and your brain is filling in the information because you are a smart human being, and it's saying that is a tree. And really all I've done is make a bunch of scribbles. Then to finish this maple tree out, I'm going to shade the wood so that it's not just an outline on a horizon. And the mistake that a lot of people would make is trying to draw every branch. If you're drawing a tree that's got leaves on it, you're only going to see bits and pieces of branches. You're not going to see the entire structure of the tree. So I would say less is more, and let the viewer's brain fill it in for them. So there's a maple tree. I'm actually going to switch pencils because I said the 3B, you don't have to sharpen it all that often, but I was pressing down hard enough that I don't think I'll get all the way through a willow tree with that. So I'm going to switch, and maybe I'll use an HB for comparison. So this one is also close to the middle of the number line that I mentioned. But this one's going to be a harder lead and slightly lighter. Actually, before I get into this whole willow tree, I'll show a few variations here. So this is an H pencil. It's going to be harder to erase because it's more likely to dig into the paper. And it's pretty light. This is an HB. You can see it's slightly darker. This was the 3B, and now I'll jump to an 8B, which is going to be a very dark, very soft lead. So this is one, if you're doing really dark shading, this is what you'd want. You're also going to be sharpening your pencil pretty frequently. You can see it's already dulled the tip a little bit there. So back to the HB pencil for our willow tree. And the willow tree is going to have a fairly wide base to it. And then what I'm going to do is create where I want the top of my tree to be. And a willow tree is going to droop a lot. So my marks are all going to be, I mentioned on the maple tree drawing the wood the direction that it's growing. And on a willow tree, the same thing, you're going to want to draw all these hanging bits the direction that they're growing and hanging. So this is just going to be a whole bunch of downward pencil strokes, again, kind of kicking the pencil out. And you want to be mindful of gravity. So these lines are all going to go perpendicular to the horizon line, assuming that my horizon is flat, I should say, it's not on a hill. So gravity is going to pull all of these straight down unless they're blowing in the wind. So you want to make sure that you're perpendicular to the ground. And I'm kind of making these in some varying lengths, some of them long, some of them shorter, to mimic the way these trees would naturally look. One of the things that I love about drawing, you start to sort of have a better visual memory of things that you've seen, I think, by practicing drawing. So if you sit and look at something and study it to draw it, you'll remember the lessons that you learned from doing that. And I feel like people that take the time to sit and draw kind of have a better visual map of the world than people that don't draw. You're more mindful of small details and things, and you're always learning. Every time you sit down to draw, you'll learn something. Whether it's a technique thing or if you just make an observation about something in the world, you'll always learn when you sit down to draw. It's one of the reasons that I'm a big supporter of the arts, and I don't really understand when the arts get defunded, because there's a lot to be learned through the arts that you don't really pick up any other way. And on a weeping willow, sometimes you'll get these little guys kind of breaking out from the rest of the tree that are new growth. And they'll have short strands coming off. So this is something that, it might look relatively complicated to make a weeping willow tree. But as you can see, really all I did was, this is little more than a vertical rectangle down here. And then just a bunch of lines coming down, and I'm just being sort of mindful of how I'm making those lines, but sometimes you just have to be creative in how you're going to get the effect that you want. I'm going to create a pocket of shadow over here. So for this part, the strands, I made all of them coming down. For the shadow, I'm going to actually kick my pencil up to separate some of these strands. And I'm going to fill in this chunk right here. And again, this is an HB pencil, so this one kind of bites into the paper a lot more than the 3B. So it's fine if you don't plan on erasing, but if you're going to be erasing, I would recommend, if you're using anything with an H in the name, press down very lightly as you go. Otherwise you'll regret it. And again, I'm just creating a little bit more shadow here to make it a little more interesting. And then I'm going to create a shadow under both of the trees that we've made. I'm going to switch back to that 3B pencil. It was a little easier to do what I wanted. And when you're making the shadow, you want to pay attention to the edges of where you made your tree. So if this tree would be, pretty direct sunlight coming from above. If I was doing this tree late in the afternoon where let's say the sunlight's coming from this way, the shadow would be very stretched out to the right. But if you're making the sun overhead, then you want the shadow to be pretty much the same width as your tree. And my recommendation for drawing trees is definitely draw them the direction they're growing. Same thing if you're drawing a portrait and you're making someone with hair, draw that hair the direction that it's growing, and you'll see a vast improvement over if you had just drawn it any which way. All right, so here is our maple tree and our weeping willow. The maple tree we did by making a bunch of scribbly marks to imply the leaves rather than try to draw every single one of them. And the weeping willow, we made a bunch of vertical lines going straight down so that gravity is still working. And with both of them, the bark we wanted to draw, the trunks we wanted to draw with our lines going up to create the illusion of growth and make it look right. And if you're drawing roots, remember to draw them going outward, don't draw them going in. So draw everything the direction that it grows. Hope you enjoyed watching, and tune in next time for another episode of the Paige Doodle Club.
Now that you've finished your doodles, color them in and then share them with both Mike Paige and Medfield TV. We're going to take those images and we're going to put them all over our station. Can't wait to see what you guys make.